I don't think anyone would argue against the statement that it's crucial in the HR field to be able to build effective relationships with both management and employees. But is it possible to make every voice heard within an organization? Can you reconcile what is best for an organization and the teams and individuals within it? To discuss this, I am joined by Kaja Podgorna-Strzelec, an HR leader at PwC in Poland. Kaja, welcome to In Good Company. Thank you very much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very well.
Excellent.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. And I would like to kick us off with the question that we ask all of our guests that join us on this podcast, which is to tell us about yourself in 60 seconds.
60 seconds. Okay, so I'm Kaja Podgorna-Strzelec. I'm actually a PwC fan. I've been working at PwC for 14 years, most of my career actually. But I've also been a coach and a trainer. So I've actually, spent most of my career around leadership development, but also sort of HR generalist area. I'm also a mom of 2 daughters, so that's a big chunk of my life as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. We have one little one, and one's enough at the moment for us. He runs ring round us, I tell you. And so you mentioned there you've worked for PwC, and you're a PwC fan for 14 years. Is that right?
Yes, that's true. I started as an intern. I'm now HC leader, director. So
you've climbed the ladder. Well, brilliant. Well, I'm sure we'll be able to pick your brain and get some really valuable insights with all your experience over the years. So let's get straight to our first question with in relation to the topic of today's episode. So you mentioned about working in HR, and you've got a kind of an HR background. So what would you say is some of the biggest challenges that face HR today, and how do you think that they could be addressed?
Well, I think that because there are so many external sort of factors that are going on, our work as HR is getting more and more complex. And I'm mainly referring to that, the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, the economical situation, etc. I mean, there are so many factors, and I think that the way we work basically has changed in terms of when I'm looking a few years back, when I'm looking at where we are now, it has changed so immensely in our day-to-day. And I'm not only talking about, where we work. So I'm talking about hybrid, remote, so the actual place of work, but also how we work and how organizations function on a day-to-day life. So I think that as HR, we have to be really, really agile and know what is going on, and to actually hear what employees are facing, what our leaders are facing, what the business is facing, and just to make the solutions or the support that all of them, each of these groups actually require. And in terms of what I see has changed a lot is that not only the pandemic, but also the situation where we're now, is that people actually sort of voice more. So they talk about what their expectations are when they have fears, and they do have fears, and they are fatigued, they are stressed, they actually talk about it. And this is something that hasn't been present at least a few years back when I'm looking at an organizational level. And this poses a huge challenge to our leaders. And this is where actually HR can come in and somehow help and support the leaders in their everyday life. And especially that I believe that the leadership positions have actually evolved, and we kept adding layers of new tasks and new responsibilities to our leaders. And I'm talking about, taking care of people who were, for example, during the pandemic, working fully remote. So taking care of them, having their stress levels under, at a certain level, but also handling the leaders' stress themselves, right? So I think that we keep adding some tasks to them, and we don't sort of give them enough support, but also like the situational on the economical on the market is not easy, so they also have to struggle there. And also, for example, in consulting, we still have to keep very high levels of good quality of the projects we're delivering, we're selling. So we keep adding new tasks, new responsibilities, and at the same time, the role stays more or less the same. People have the same amount of time, and I think that the leadership role is just becoming more and more difficult. So from an HR point of view, this is really a huge area to figure out how to support the leaders, but also how to make some systemic changes into the roles themselves, because I'm not talking only about the people leadership roles, but I'm also talking about different roles within their organization, just to rethink whether they are still manageable, whether they are adequate, whether they are still relevant, and just to figure out whether the ways of working that we had before and which have changed, and whether the roles are actually compatible to that. So I think that there are lots of challenges with regards to how we work and how leaders can support that. So that's one of the challenges that I see.
And so, how can you give a specific example of how you've maybe overcome one of those challenges?
Well, for example, we've been supporting our leaders since 2019, because we had a huge exprogram which was aimed at improving their skills, sort of introducing a new role, and explaining exactly what it means to be a leader in PwC. So about communicating strategy, about sharing vision, about change management, about innovation, and of course the huge aspect regarding people management. But now within the last few years, we just had to all the time revise what we're teaching, what we're making people learn, because the pandemic, and then afterwards, like a lot of levels of anxiety that the leaders have to deal with. This is something that we've put a lot of emotional intelligence webinars. We've included that into the curriculum, so as a base. And so we've just changed that. And there is another approach which we're actually introducing as of now, is that we will be rethinking the roles that we have in the organization. Right. So we have, typically in consulting, you have from intern to partner level, and it's like a consulting path, career path. But we have several others. But what we will be this year figuring out, is it enough just to have different pathways? Maybe we just need to figure out whether we don't have to somehow split the roles and the responsibilities, because it is becoming a lot more difficult to be a leader or a manager in consulting at this moment, and have all kinds of hats on. So the people hat on, the client hat on, the risk and compliance, which is also a big part of our everyday life, hat on. So it's like it's just getting more and more complicated. And the question is whether it's still manageable for people in their everyday life. So this is a project which is kicking off right now, just to rethink that.
Well, one thing I'm taking from what you've been saying there is about the importance of communication, and that importance of dialogue within the organization. And I know that kind of making sure that we talked about, hearing everybody's voice and making sure everybody's voice is heard. We mentioned that in the introduction. So how does that work in practice? How do you make sure that everybody's voice is heard? Is it possible to kind of reconcile those needs of the company and the team and the individual?
Well, first of all, of course, we have formal sort of, surveys and questionnaires, and that's like just the data that we have. But we also need to make sure that we correctly understand what's behind this data. And obviously, additional sort of checks, workshops, etc., of people just understand what's behind that, what's not voiced but is somehow in the silence. But also, for example, when when we were thinking of introducing hybrid working model. We just said we don't want a one-stop shop for everybody, the same standard. And what we said, okay, we have to approach this, on team level, because it's not only about the individual, it's not only about the team, but it's also, we have clients who also have some expectations on how we work, when we are available, and also obviously the organization. So we told our teams, guys, you have to figure it out, looking at different perspectives. And for, I think it was 1.5 to 2 years, it actually worked. So managers did their job. They actually facilitated those workshops within their teams. They agreed some standards, when they come, how they work, how they communicate. And that was done, as I said, I think it was 2 years back. It worked. However, for example, for this year, we will have to revisit. So we got those voices that there is a new sort of, people need new tools, people need new ways. So I think there is not going to be one sort of approach that will be, going on from now until for several years, but we will have to be very agile and sort of rework and reintroduce, and also be okay with that, for example, in one of the lines of service that we have in our departments, we will have like an obligation of coming 2 days in the office, when, for example, in other teams, it's not going to be working because it's needed. There, it's more like client expectations. In case of others, it may not be. So we also have to be somehow open that we're not going to find one way that works for everybody, because I really don't believe that something like that really exists. Yeah, but it's basically up to the leader, up to the team, up to the individuals to make it work, because HC can, or HR can actually, facilitate, moderate, give some kind of framework, but it's up to the people who make the team, who make the organization to make it work, basically. Yeah. That's how we see it.
I really like what you said there about having a bit constantly evolving whatever it is that you do, because like you say, there's no one thing fixes all, for whether it's to do with geographic location or individual team or whatever. So yeah, I really like what you said there. And what about an actual practical way then of making sure that every voice is heard? What can, like, if so let's assume that leaders are listening to this and go, right, okay, well, how can I actually, what's a good top tip to make sure that I can make sure that voices are heard within my team, or what advice would you give?
Well, I think we're always looking for some kind of one golden rule or one golden advice, and the fact is that it's very easy, that you just have to be open with your people, and you have to ask, not tell. So don't assume, don't think that whatever has proved right in the past, or whatever you might think that somebody might like, just don't figure it out, ask. Yeah. Sure, and I think that's just, there is no better tip here, but I think that we're still learning how we function in this new reality. Don't, as a leader, don't assume you have to know it all, because I don't know, I'm reading a lot of reports from different companies around, well, how does hybrid work? What works? How does it resonate with culture? How does it resonate with effectiveness? And we have all kinds of reports. Sometimes they're contradicting, sometimes not. But basically, it only shows that nobody has the right answer, because we're still learning, and we're learning on the job as we go. Sure. And I think people also have better and worse times. So sometimes they are very, they want to go back to the office. They feel they need the connection. Half a year later, they say, I need flexibility. I do want to stay at home more. Yeah. So it also changes. So no better way than just to sit with your team and really ask, guys, so for the next few months, how are we going to do from perspective of you as individuals and us as a team? Because we also need to function in this reality, in our project work, everyday life as a team. So I think really regularly, saying, guys, let's just do a stop and let's just talk about how we're doing. I think that's the only way.
Yeah, I totally agree. That whole thing of like, once you come up with, you might put loads of work into agreeing an approach for something, but that might work for 6 months, and then 6 months time, yeah, exactly, yeah, you've got to change it again. But having that attitude towards being so flexible is ultimately going to be helpful, right? Because you're going to be be able to be, as you said, that keyword is agile and agility, that you can kind of change at a moment's notice should you need to. The other thing I was picking up on there was I liked what you said, and that kind of diversity of an opinion, of getting thoughts and feelings from everybody within a team, because you're going to get different ages, you're going to get different backgrounds, you're going to get all sorts of things that then marry into hopefully a better solution for whatever it is, whatever challenge you're facing. And I really like what you said there about asking questions, and a key part of that, of course, is listening and coaching, and which is a total segue into my next question, which is because we know that coaching has been a bit of a focus for you in your career, and so coaching and HR, do you think that should be a kind of something that's aligned? Do you think that they need to be? Do you think coaching is a key element of HR? What do you think the benefits are?
I mean, for HR, I think for every leader, every team member, coaching should be like an obligatory skill, because it's basically about asking rather than telling. That's exactly what I said before, and I really believe in that, because it's about curiosity for the other person, their perspective, etc. But I think that also from the leader's point of view is that you don't always have to take responsibility if somebody is asking a question or has a problem. You can actually help this person find the answer or the solution themselves. And that's a huge great skill to have, being able to figure it out and not getting stuck, going to the manager, and the manager will actually solve your problems. And I think that especially in times when we won't be able to find the right solutions for everybody. We just won't. And I know that especially in consulting, which is my industry, we always think problem solution, and that's how our leaders approach whenever somebody comes with a problem, whether it's a client or their people from the team. And it does give a huge burden that you have to know it all. And believe me, it's not possible to know it all. So it's just sometimes better to ask, to really get to the bottom of the problem, to get to know the perspective, and perhaps together come up with a solution, rather than taking the responsibility upon yourself that you have to know it all. You don't, and it's not possible. Just, so.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with and also help. Part of that, you don't have to know the answer, but it might be that whoever is the coachee in that scenario, they might know the answer, they just don't necessarily realize it yet, and that's exactly what can be a great outcome from a coaching conversation. I couldn't agree more, really. Well, out of interest, how long have you kind of used coaching as a kind of a particular practice for yourself? Like, was there a particular moment where coaching, you thought, okay, yeah, this is where we should put some energy and focus into?
Well, I think that whenever I started working in HR, I had sort of two interests. One was coaching, and the other one was training. And since I started somehow developing in those areas, I've just incorporated those bits into my everyday life. So whenever I was meeting, I was using some kind of techniques from coaching, or whenever I had a presentation, I was using a lot of skills from training. After a while, I moved into L&D, and I also worked as a freelance coach for a bit when I was in the US. So I think that these are the skills that I just used in everyday life, depending on the role that I had. But these are really skills that have proved very valuable when I'm looking back. And I think that in terms of understanding or hearing the other person, coaching has been a fundamental and has played a crucial role in that.
Comes in very handy for looking after 2 children as well, I should imagine.
Absolutely, both training and coaching as well.
For sure. Whilst doing the research for this episode, we came across some information that you introduced something at PwC Polska, the hashtag workation. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And so, tell me a bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, we introduced it, I think, in just shortly after pandemic. There were some ideas because people just said, if I'm to stay at home and not move, can I just work from somewhere where it's sunny and basically use that opportunity to move somewhere? So the initial idea is, yeah, why? It's a great idea. Why not? But then we started digging into some kind of details, and together with our legal department, we just started like looking at all the immigration things and legal perspective, tax perspective, and all the social security, etc. So from a small thing, it grew into a huge project, which was quite complex. But at the end, we just thought that it's not possible to allow our people to work anywhere because it just poses both risks for them and for us as a company. So we have we call it whitelist of countries where it's okay to work from abroad for a specific time. So
Sure.
I think it's 40 days. But basically, these are the countries where we actually checked all the immigration legal stuff, and we actually made sure that the risks are minimal or non-existent. And there is a procedure around that. It's not like we just allow people to go there. So we have to check everything, make sure that it's really safe. But absolutely, we allow that, and I think we've had 300 people already until now who have actually made use of and people love it really.
So just to be absolutely clear, so the idea is that as part of somebody, if they were wanting to go on holiday to a destination, they could go. I could work there for 2 weeks, say, before my vacation, and then have the other 2 weeks already having been there. So you get in effect. I see. Right. Okay. What a great idea. And have you seen? What's been the feedback of that the people who have gone through it, have they?
Absolutely positive. I mean, people love it because, especially that they say that even the change of the surroundings, even if it's for, 1 week of workation and 1 week of vacation, they really say that it makes you, really want to move, to somehow travel, but also not to stay too long away from work because of the projects, etc. So really, they say a lot of positive stuff around that. So we are going to continue that for sure.
Yeah, great. Well, it's a brilliant idea, and I think that as long as it can be done responsibly from both parts, then I think it's a really nice idea. We have rapidly got to the end of our list of questions, which has gone so fast. I've been fascinated by everything we've been talking about. So our final question, which we ask all of our guests on this podcast, is: if you were to start your career again, start from scratch, what would be the best piece of advice you would give your younger self?
Listen to your gut, because I think that especially that when you're young, you're not always sure, about the decisions you're going to make, and you take into consideration your parents or other people who you believe they are very wise, and you always think that maybe what you're thinking and feeling may not be the way to go. But I'm just looking at my career and the decisions that I made, which were really according to my gut, also in career, but also in work life, have been really beneficial. And there is something that I believe in intuition. I believe that there is something more than only rational thinking. So listening to your gut, I think, is one of the things that I would definitely advise myself when I
Yeah.
was younger.
Yeah, it's a great piece of advice, and I think a lot of people, and I probably would do the same. Trust your gut a bit more. I was very safe for the most part, I think, as a younger person, and probably a bit too safe. Taking calculated risks probably would have been beneficial for me as well. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that can really relate to that. Well, thank you very much, Kaja, for joining us.
Thank you.
It's been, as I said before, it's been a fascinating conversation, and I feel like we've covered some really good stuff there. And kind of, I suppose in recapping, I think there's been some really nice stuff about asking lots of questions, which I probably do maybe too much of if I was to speak to some of my colleagues and things. But the power of asking questions, I think, is my biggest takeaway from today. So yeah, thank you very much. Curiosity is a great thing. So that just remains for me to say that if you would like to catch up with either of us on LinkedIn, then you can do so by finding the links in the description. And of course, if you would like to find out more about Impact, then please also find those links in the description of wherever you found this podcast. So that just remains for me to thank Kaja again for joining me today. So thank you, Kaja. And until the next time, take care.